They tried to evict the old man, his law firm shut down their firm. The air in the sterile conference room crackled with a tension that only one man seemed truly aware of. 78-year-old Silas Blackwood, slumped slightly in his chair, his frame appearing shrunken in a threadbare suit, watched Reginald Sterling and Vivian Hayes with eyes that seemed clouded by age. Yet, behind that veil, a sharp, almost mischievous glint flickered, a silent testament to the mind that had once reshaped corporate America. He noted the meticulously polished surface of the grand mahogany table, reflecting the cold fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the worn fabric of his own suit. Reginald, a man whose tailored suit seemed to scream his self-importance, leaned back, a smug smirk playing on his lips, oblivious to the careful observation. Beside him, Vivian, sharp and predatory, tapped a perfectly manicured nail against a stack of eviction notices, her gaze fixed on the frail figure before them with undisguised contempt. Silas felt a familiar, bitter taste on his tongue, the taste of their predictable arrogance. "Mr. Blackwood," Reginald began, his voice dripping with feigned politeness that barely masked his impatience, "we've been over this. The offer stands. Or rather, it stood. Your time is up. The building will be vacated. You can fight it, but it will only delay the inevitable and cost you what little you have left." He gestured vaguely at the stacks of documents, as if proving an indisputable point, his gaze dismissive, already moving on to the next deal in his mind. Vivian chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that grated on Silas's ears. "Honestly, Mr. Blackwood, it's rather sad, isn't it? Refusing reasonable compensation, clinging to a dream that's clearly over. A man of your advanced years, one would think you'd prefer a quiet life, not a protracted legal battle you simply cannot win." Her words were a carefully aimed dart, designed to prickle and dishearten, crafted to dismantle any lingering shred of his resolve. They believed they had him cornered, a senile old man with no fight left, his spirit broken, his resources depleted. They believed they held all the cards, their confidence a thick, suffocating cloud in the room. But Silas merely offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. His gaze drifted from Reginald to Vivian, then back again, lingering for a moment on Reginald's polished shoes. The irony was a bitter, delectable taste on his tongue, a private joke only he understood. This young man, who owed his very start, his first significant capital, his entire career, to the very person he was now so casually attempting to evict, remained blissfully unaware. He saw the self-congratulatory gleam in Reginald's eyes, the almost palpable sense of victory. The web of deceit Silas had meticulously spun over the past 2 years, each thread carefully placed, each illusion painstakingly maintained, was about to unravel. It would not be a gentle sigh of defeat, but a thunderous roar, a cataclysm that would rip through their carefully constructed world. "You're right, Ms. Hayes." Silas's voice was a reedy whisper, seemingly weakened by age, yet carrying an unexpected undercurrent of steel, a barely perceptible vibration that hinted at hidden depths. "The time for games is indeed over." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting their confident smiles solidify into an unshakable belief in their impending victory, allowing them to bask in the false glow of their perceived triumph. "And gentlemen, ladies," he added, his gaze sweeping over the handful of Sterling and Hayes associates present, all mirroring their superior's self-satisfaction, their eager faces reflecting the anticipated downfall of an old fool. "You truly have no idea just how over it is." The words hung in the air, a cryptic pronouncement that, to their ears, sounded like the ramblings of a defeated old man, a final, desperate gasp. To Silas, however, they were the opening salvo of a war they were entirely unprepared to fight, a declaration that their carefully orchestrated play was merely a prologue to his true masterpiece. Silas Blackwood was not merely a wealthy man, he was a titan, a living legend whispered about in the hallowed halls of finance and law. At 78, his name, synonymous with razor-sharp intellect and an uncanny ability to turn dust into gold, still commanded respect, and often fear. His career, spanning 5 decades, had seen him build a corporate law empire from scratch, then pivot seamlessly into real estate investment, accumulating a fortune that dwarfed that of many nations. He had navigated economic downturns with ease, outmaneuvered rivals with strategic brilliance, and built an empire that seemed unshakable. Yet, beneath the veneer of success, a profound disillusionment had taken root, slowly poisoning his spirit, eroding the very foundations of his contentment. The gilded cage he inhabited felt increasingly like a prison. He had started his journey with an idealistic vision, believing in the power of innovation, the pursuit of excellence, and the creation of lasting value. He had genuinely believed that wealth, when responsibly managed, could be a force for good, a catalyst for progress. He had mentored countless young minds, pouring his knowledge and, often, his own capital into their ventures, hoping to foster a new generation of ethical, driven leaders who would build a better world. Reginald Sterling had been one of them, a bright, ambitious young lawyer whom Silas had personally plucked from obscurity, financing his first major real estate deal, guiding him through the labyrinthine world of acquisitions. Silas had seen promise in Reginald, a spark of the hunger that had driven himself in his youth, a raw talent for business. He had seen, or perhaps wished to see, a protégé who would carry forward a legacy of not just profit, but also principle, a torchbearer for the values he held dear. But over the years, that spark had curdled into a relentless, insatiable greed. The transformation had been insidious, gradual, like a slow-growing cancer. Silas watched with growing dismay as the industry he had helped shape became increasingly consumed by superficiality, a relentless pursuit of the next big score, regardless of the human cost. He saw once promising protégés, like Reginald, shed their ethical skins as easily as old suits, transforming into ruthless developers who bulldozed communities for luxury condos, their consciences conveniently outsourced to legal loopholes and market forces. Philanthropy, once a genuine passion, felt increasingly hollow, a mere veneer for the predatory practices he witnessed daily, a tax-deductible facade behind which true moral decay festered. It was as if the very values he had instilled had been twisted into tools for exploitation, his own teachings weaponized against the vulnerable. The tipping point came subtly, not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing erosion of trust, a corrosive disillusionment that left him feeling empty. He saw former colleagues, once stalwarts of integrity, compromise their principles for a bigger bonus, their eyes betraying a quiet shame they quickly suppressed. He observed the casual cruelty of developers dispossessing vulnerable tenants, their arguments couched in legalese and market forces, their faces devoid of empathy. The world, it seemed, was becoming a colder, harder place, where empathy was a weakness and ruthlessness a virtue, where human connection was replaced by transactional efficiency. He began to question everything, his legacy, the impact of his work, and the very nature of humanity itself. Was the pursuit of wealth inherently corrupting? Had he, in his own ascent, inadvertently paved the way for this moral decay, this ruthless indifference? The thought gnawed at him, a constant, nagging doubt. Silas felt a profound weariness, a spiritual exhaustion that wealth could not alleviate. He needed to understand, truly understand, if the kindness he occasionally witnessed was a rare anomaly or if genuine human compassion still existed beneath the polished surfaces of modern society. He needed to step outside his gilded cage, shed the intimidating aura of Silas Blackwood, and experience the world as the vulnerable did. He needed a test, a crucible, to ascertain if the darkness he perceived was ubiquitous or if glimmers of light still persisted. He sought a definitive answer to the question that haunted his later years: was the world truly lost to greed, or could goodness still triumph? Thus, the elaborate charade began. With the precision of a master strategist, Silas meticulously faked a significant decline in his health and wealth. He began appearing disoriented, making poor investment decisions that were, in fact, carefully calculated diversions, his public appearances becoming increasingly erratic, designed to give the impression of a mind succumbing to age. He quietly liquidated assets, channeling them into a labyrinthine network of shell companies, their ownership trails so convoluted that even the most tenacious forensic accountant would be stumped, a masterpiece of financial misdirection. The very apartment building that Sterling and Hayes now coveted, a seemingly dilapidated, rent-controlled structure in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, was one of his earliest, most strategically placed acquisitions through these companies, decades ago. It had been a long-term hold, a quiet investment designed to preserve affordable housing, a tiny, almost hidden rebellion against the very forces he now sought to expose, a silent monument to his fading idealism. He chose the Mr. Blackwood persona carefully, an elderly, reclusive man, seemingly on the brink of destitution, clinging to his last vestiges of dignity, his life reduced to a handful of worn possessions. He moved into a modest, two-bedroom apartment in the building, observing the other tenants, the rhythm of their lives, and the subtle shifts in the neighborhood. He wanted to see how the world treated the powerless, how those he had once nurtured would behave when faced with someone they perceived as insignificant, someone they could easily crush. He wanted to observe human nature firsthand, unadulterated by the distorting lens of his immense wealth and power. And he wanted to catch those he suspected of exploitation, particularly Reginald Sterling, in their purest, most unvarnished form, stripped of their public facades. The stage was set, the players unknowingly in their positions. The grand experiment had begun, its outcome eagerly awaited. The initial eviction notice arrived, a crisp, official document that landed on the threadbare carpet of Silas's apartment like a harbinger of doom. Mr. Blackwood, as he was now universally known, picked it up with a trembling hand, his feigned confusion perfectly crafted. The notice, issued by Sterling and Hayes Realty Group, cited a myriad of vague reasons, necessary renovations, structural integrity concerns, and the ever-present market adjustment. It was a thinly veiled attempt to push out the long-term, rent-controlled tenants, a common tactic he had seen employed countless times. Reginald Sterling, with Vivian Hayes by his side, orchestrated the campaign with ruthless efficiency, their legal team a well-oiled machine of intimidation. They began with polite, yet firm, phone calls, offering paltry buyouts that barely covered a month's rent elsewhere, let alone the loss of a decades-long home. When these were refused by most of the elderly residents, including Silas, the tactics escalated. They sent menacing letters, implying legal action and steep costs, threatening to ruin what little credit the tenants might have left. Property managers, under their strict orders, started making inspections at inconvenient times, early mornings, late evenings, leaving notes about minor infractions, attempting to create a paper trail of non-compliance, of tenants deemed troublesome. One elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, a former librarian with failing eyesight, received a notice for excessive clutter because of her beloved collection of books, many of which had been there for decades. Silas observed her quiet despair, a deep sorrow settling in his gut. The heating and hot water in the building mysteriously became unreliable, then failed altogether for days at a time, especially during colder spells. Silas shivered, though less from the cold than from the sheer audacity of their tactics. He saw Mrs. Chen, a frail woman who relied on hot water for her daily tea and morning ablutions, struggle with cold showers. The elevator, already rickety, developed a habit of getting stuck, trapping elderly residents for agonizing minutes, sometimes longer. Mr. Henderson, a retired postal worker with a heart condition, was once stuck for nearly an hour, his frantic calls for help echoing unheard. These were not mere coincidences. Silas, with his deep understanding of real estate strong-arming tactics, recognized them immediately as deliberate, calculated maneuvers to make life unbearable, to force voluntary departures, to drain the tenant's will to resist. He noted every incident, every plea, every tear. One particularly cold morning, the entire building's heating system was under repair. tenants huddled in their apartments, bundled in layers, their breath fogging in the frigid air. Silas, shivering deliberately, stumbled out to the hallway, feigning a dizzy spell, his hand against the cold plaster wall. Reginald and Vivian were present, overseeing a team of engineers who seemed to be doing very little, their expensive coats contrasting sharply with the tenants' worn blankets. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Hayes," Silas's voice was weak, his words carefully chosen to evoke pity. "It's so cold. My old bones. I'm afraid I might catch a chill." He watched their faces for any sign of genuine concern. Reginald merely offered a dismissive wave, his attention already drifting back to his phone. "These things happen, Mr. Blackwood. Old buildings, you know. We're working on it. Patience is a virtue, especially in situations like this." His eyes, however, conveyed a distinct lack of empathy, a flicker of annoyance at the inconvenience Silas presented, at the distraction from his busy schedule. Vivian, ever sharper, ever more direct, chimed in, "Perhaps this is a sign, Mr. Blackwood. A comfortable, modern apartment with central heating would surely be preferable to enduring such inconveniences, wouldn't it? Our offer is still on the table, for a limited time, of course." She smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes, as if offering him salvation while simultaneously twisting the knife, enjoying his perceived helplessness. Silas simply nodded, feigning resignation, his heart a cold, hard stone of certainty. Their callousness was even more profound than he had anticipated, their moral bankruptcy truly absolute. The next phase involved legal intimidation. Sterling and Hayes filed formal eviction lawsuits against several tenants, including Silas, citing owner occupancy and necessity for demolition. These were flimsy pretexts, easily challenged by a competent lawyer, but designed to exhaust the limited resources and mental fortitude of the elderly residents. Many tenants, overwhelmed by the legal jargon and the prospect of court, accepted the meager buyouts, their faces etched with defeat as they packed their lives into boxes. Silas watched them go, a pang of sorrow mixed with grim determination. He knew their sacrifices would not be in vain. It was during this period that Silas encountered Elena Rodriguez. Elena was a young legal aid lawyer, barely out of law school, her idealism still intact despite the crushing realities of her underfunded office. Her caseload was overwhelming, her salary meager, yet her commitment to justice burned brightly, an unwavering flame in the darkness. She worked out of a cramped, dimly lit office downtown, its walls adorned with handwritten notes and inspirational quotes, a testament to the endless battle she fought daily. She had been assigned to several tenants in Silas's building, including him, her name passed around by word of mouth among the frightened residents. The first time she met Mr. Blackwood in her cramped office, she saw a frail, bewildered old man, clearly outmatched by the corporate behemoth he faced, his vulnerability almost painful to witness. "Mr. Blackwood," Elena began, her voice gentle, filled with a genuine concern that surprised Silas, "I understand you're facing eviction. This is a tough fight, but we'll do our best. Can you tell me everything you remember about your lease, any interactions with the landlord?" She leaned forward, her gaze earnest, ready to absorb every detail. Silas, playing his part to perfection, sighed heavily, a convincing sound of weariness. "I've been here over 50 years, dear. My lease, it's ancient, from before they even owned the building. I just paid my rent, never caused trouble. Now they want to throw an old man out onto the street." He sniffled, a convincing portrayal of vulnerability, his eyes watering slightly, not from sadness, but from the effort of holding back his true self. Elena's brow furrowed with genuine concern, her hand instinctively reaching out to pat his arm. "That's despicable. They're clearly trying to exploit long-term tenants. We'll fight this. It won't be easy, but we'll fight." And she did. She meticulously combed through old housing codes, dug up obscure precedents that dated back decades, and spent countless late nights drafting motions and preparing arguments, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unyielding sense of right. She visited the building frequently, not just for legal work, but to check on the residents, bringing them small comforts, a thermos of hot tea for Silas when the heating failed, a spare blanket for Mrs. Chin, a genuine smile and a reassuring word for Mr. Henderson. She listened patiently to their stories, their fears, their anxieties, treating each person with dignity and respect, seeing them not as cases, but as human beings whose lives were being uprooted. Silas observed her closely during these visits, noting her kindness, her tireless dedication. He saw her helping Mrs. Gable organize her books, even offering to help her read her mail. He watched her patiently explain complex legal terms to Mr. Henderson, who often got confused. Her empathy was boundless. Silas observed her closely. He saw her exhaustion, the dark circles under her eyes, the worn cuffs of her modest blazer, the faint worry lines on her forehead. He knew she was struggling financially, that her legal aid clinic was perpetually on the verge of collapse, relying on grants and donations that barely kept its doors open. Yet, she never once wavered in her dedication. When Reginald and Vivian's lawyers presented a new, particularly aggressive motion, implying Silas had violated some obscure clause from the 1970s, Elena was incensed, her quiet demeanor replaced by a fierce resolve. "This is ridiculous," she argued in a preliminary hearing, her voice clear and strong despite her nervousness, her passion cutting through the stuffy courtroom air. "They're fabricating claims. Mr. Blackwood has been a model tenant for decades. This is nothing more than harassment, a transparent attempt to force him out." Reginald, present with his own formidable legal team, merely sneered, an expression of disdain crossing his face. "Young lady, you're out of your depth. This is business. Your client is impeding progress, holding back the inevitable march of revitalization." Vivian, ever the pragmatist, added, her tone condescending, "Perhaps you should advise your client to accept our offer. It will save everyone a lot of trouble, and you, Ms. Rodriguez, a lot of wasted time and effort." Elena, though visibly intimidated by their power and resources, by the sheer weight of their legal might, stood firm, her chin slightly raised. "My client has rights, and I will ensure they are upheld. We will not be bullied. We will not surrender." Silas watched this exchange, a profound sense of satisfaction settling over him, a quiet certainty blooming in his heart. Elena's integrity was undeniable, a stark contrast to the predatory nature of Reginald and Vivian. She represented the glimmer of light he had desperately sought, the proof that true human compassion still existed, even in this cynical world. He saw the genuine care in her eyes, the unwavering conviction in her voice, and it solidified his resolve. The test was complete. He had seen the absolute moral decay of those he had once believed in, the utter absence of principle in their pursuit of profit. And he had seen the pure, unadulterated kindness of a stranger, a young woman fighting for justice against overwhelming odds, with nothing to gain but the satisfaction of doing what was right. The time for observation was over. The time for reckoning had arrived, and he felt a thrill of anticipation. The final court hearing was set. Sterling and Hayes had pushed relentlessly, confident that their superior resources and legal might would prevail, that the judge would finally grant them the victory they so desired. They had scheduled the hearing for maximum impact, coinciding with a high-profile real estate industry gala that Reginald and Vivian planned to attend afterward, their victory serving as a pre-celebration, a public display of their dominance. The courthouse gallery was packed, a mix of curious journalists eager for a story, a few remaining tenants clinging to a desperate hope, and a large contingent from Sterling and Hayes, all eager to witness the final, decisive blow against the old man and his stubborn defiance. Reginald and Vivian sat at their table, exuding an air of smug anticipation, their victory already a foregone conclusion in their minds. Their lead counsel, a sharp, unyielding corporate lawyer known for his aggressive tactics, was presenting their final arguments, dissecting Elena's defense with surgical precision, painting Mr. Blackwood as an unreasonable obstructionist, a relic of a bygone era. Elena, though exhausted, fought valiantly, her voice hoarse from days of preparation, her arguments passionate but seemingly outmatched by the sheer weight of Sterling and Hayes's legal team and their seemingly endless documentation. Silas sat beside her, his head bowed, appearing utterly defeated, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched a worn handkerchief, maintaining the illusion to the very last moment. "Your Honor," Sterling and Hayes's lawyer concluded, his voice resonating with confidence, "the evidence is clear. This building is structurally unsound, a liability to the community, and a drain on our resources. Our plans for redevelopment will revitalize the neighborhood and provide much-needed luxury housing. Mr. Blackwood's continued tenancy is simply untenable, economically and practically." He delivered his closing statement with an air of finality, confident in victory, already imagining the celebratory toasts. The judge, a stern woman known for her adherence to the letter of the law, nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Rodriguez, any final remarks?" Elena took a deep breath, her eyes darting to Silas, who remained motionless, his face a mask of resignation. "Your Honor," she began, her voice gaining strength, infused with a final surge of conviction, "what we have here is not merely a legal dispute over property. It is a cynical attempt by a powerful corporation to exploit vulnerable individuals for profit. My client, Mr. Blackwood, has been a tenant in good standing for over 50 years. He has nowhere else to go. This is his home. To evict him under these fabricated pretenses would be an injustice, a stain on the very principles of fairness and compassion that our legal system is meant to uphold." Her plea was heartfelt, a cry for justice, but the odds felt insurmountable, the weight of their opponent's power crushing. Just as the judge was about to speak, the courtroom doors swung open with a dramatic creak that echoed through the silent room. All heads turned. Standing in the doorway, framed by the bright light of the corridor, was a figure that sent a ripple of murmurs through the room. It was not Mr. Blackwood's appointed lawyer, Elena, but a different, impeccably dressed man, Abraham Vance, one of the most revered and feared corporate lawyers in the country, known for representing only the most powerful and secretive clients, a man whose presence alone signaled a seismic shift. Beside him stood two imposing security guards, their faces impassive. Abraham Vance, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, walked with an unhurried, purposeful stride towards the plaintiff's table, his gaze sweeping over Reginald and Vivian, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching his lips. He carried a slim leather briefcase, a silent promise of revelations within. "Your Honor," Vance's voice boomed, cutting through the hushed whispers, filling the courtroom with an undeniable authority, "I apologize for the interruption. I am here to represent the true owner of record for the property currently in dispute." He glanced pointedly at Reginald and Vivian, who now looked genuinely perplexed, their smug expressions dissolving into confusion, replaced by a dawning unease. Reginald, regaining his composure, scoffed, "A nervous habit. And who might that be, Mr. Vance?" "We are the owners. This is a frivolous delay tactic, an insult to this court." Vance merely smiled, a predatory, knowing smile that promised destruction, a silent harbinger of their impending doom. He turned to Silas, who, for the first time in months, raised his head. The tremor in his hands was gone. The feigned weakness in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a piercing, formidable gaze that seemed to bore into Reginald, stripping away his arrogance. "Mr. Blackwood," Vance announced, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, each word a hammer blow, "your performance has been exemplary. The test is complete." At these words, Silas Blackwood slowly, deliberately, straightened his posture. The shrunken frame seemed to expand, the slumped shoulders squaring, the years melting away from his face as if by magic. His eyes, now sharp and clear, held the formidable intelligence that had once terrorized boardrooms, a cold, calculating brilliance. He reached up, and with a slow, almost theatrical movement, removed the simple, unassuming glasses that had obscured his keen vision. The threadbare suit, once appearing ill-fitting and worn, now seemed merely a deliberate costume, a disguise meticulously shed. His voice, when it came, was no longer a reedy whisper but a resonant, commanding baritone that filled the room, chilling Reginald and Vivian to their very core, freezing them in place. "Reginald," Silas said, his voice laced with a cold, mocking authority that jolted Reginald to his senses. His former protégé's eyes widened in dawning horror, the color draining from his face as the recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Vivian." Silas's gaze flickered to the ambitious junior partner, who had gone pale, her meticulously composed facade crumbling. "You both have performed admirably. Your ruthlessness, your utter lack of empathy, it has exceeded even my most cynical expectations." Reginald, stammering, his voice barely a coherent whisper, finally found his voice. "Silas? What is the meaning of this? You're supposed to be..." He trailed off, the implications crashing down on him like a tidal wave, drowning his carefully constructed world. Silas merely chuckled, a low, ominous sound that reverberated through the stunned courtroom. "Supposed to be a broken old man, easy to discard, eh? A mere obstacle to your next lucrative venture? You see, Reginald, I own this building. Through a series of entities so complex even your sharpest lawyers couldn't untangle them. I've owned it for decades, since before you even dreamed of building your pathetic empire. Every single attempt you've made to evict these people, every lie, every intimidation tactic, it was all directed at my property, and ultimately, at me." He rose fully, and the entire courtroom seemed to shrink around him, diminished by his sudden, immense presence. The imposing figure of Silas Blackwood, the legendary titan of industry, stood revealed, a force of nature unleashed. He walked slowly, deliberately, around the table, until he stood directly in front of Reginald, who was now visibly trembling, a cold sweat beading on his forehead, his carefully coiffed hair suddenly appearing disheveled. "And it goes deeper than that, Reginald," Silas continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, yet still audible to all in the hushed room, a chilling pronouncement. "Remember that initial capital you secured for Sterling and Hayes? The seed money that launched your firm, that allowed you to buy your first significant properties? The anonymous investor who believed in your vision?" He paused, letting the implications sink in, letting Reginald fully grasp the magnitude of his betrayal. "That was me. Every dollar, every initial success, every step you took on your path to becoming this callous, profit-driven monster, it was built on my foundation. You tried to evict the very man who gave you the keys to your kingdom, who paved the road for your supposed triumph." Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face a mask of shock and dawning dread, her eyes wide with uncomprehending horror. Reginald looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his face ashen, his mouth agape, utterly undone. The judge, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of the revelation, cleared her throat, regaining her composure. "Mr. Blackwood, are you claiming ownership of this property, and that this entire legal proceeding has been a charade?" Silas turned to the judge, his expression now serious, devoid of the earlier mockery, a look of grim determination replacing it. "Indeed, Your Honor. And not just the property. Mr. Vance here has a series of documents to present, detailing not only my undisputed ownership of this building, but also a comprehensive investigation into Sterling and Hayes's predatory business practices, their flagrant disregard for tenant rights, their financial improprieties, and a detailed account of how they were, in fact, built on a foundation of my capital, which they have, shall we say, squandered in the pursuit of ethically dubious ventures. This is not just an eviction case, Your Honor. It is a reckoning, a long overdue cleansing. Vance stepped forward, a thick dossier in hand, its contents promising ruin. Your Honor, we have evidence of multiple instances of fraud, harassment, and gross negligence on the part of Sterling and Hayes. Furthermore, we have documents proving Mr. Blackwood's ownership of the building through a blind trust established decades ago, a trust so meticulously structured it has remained entirely off Sterling and Hayes's radar. Their claim of ownership, or indeed, their right to evict these tenants, is entirely moot. The courtroom erupted in a flurry of whispers and gasps, the dam of silence breaking as the gravity of the situation fully sank in. Elena, who had watched the entire transformation with wide-eyed astonishment, felt a surge of adrenaline, her mind reeling from the impossible revelation. The frail, bewildered old man she had fought so hard for was, in fact, Silas Blackwood, the legend, the very architect of the world she struggled within. The irony, the sheer audacity of it all, was breathtaking, a masterstroke of poetic justice. Reginald and Vivian stood frozen, their empire crumbling around them, not with a distant tremor, but with the very ground beneath their feet being pulled away by the man they had scorned, their downfall swift and absolute. The fallout was swift and catastrophic for Sterling and Hayes. The news of Silas Blackwood's revelation spread like wildfire, igniting a media frenzy that consumed the national headlines. "Billionaire fakes poverty to expose ruthless developers," screamed headlines in bold, accusatory letters. "The old man who owned the firm that tried to evict him," proclaimed others, capturing the delicious irony of the situation. The narrative was too compelling, too poetic, too undeniably satisfying to ignore, a modern-day fable of justice. Within hours of the court's adjournment, the initial legal dominoes began to fall. The judge, after reviewing the irrefutable evidence presented by Abraham Vance, immediately dismissed Sterling and Hayes's eviction lawsuits, slapping them with an injunction that forbade any further contact with the building's residents. More significantly, she referred the case to the state attorney general's office for a full investigation into their business practices, citing the compelling evidence of fraud and tenant harassment, signaling the beginning of their true legal nightmare. But the legal ramifications were just the beginning. Silas Blackwood, now fully in control and no longer bound by his disguise, unleashed the full might of his legal and financial empire. His primary law firm, Blackwood and Associates, a name that sent shivers down the spines of corporate villains, initiated a barrage of lawsuits against Sterling and Hayes. These were not mere civil suits, they targeted every shell company, every dubious deal, every partner involved in their aggressive tactics. Investigations into their financials, spearheaded by Silas's own forensic accounting teams, unearthed a litany of regulatory violations, tax evasions, and questionable dealings that had allowed them to bypass environmental regulations and zoning laws, a web of deceit far greater than anything they had imagined. Reginald Sterling, once the golden boy of the real estate world, became a pariah overnight. Investors pulled out, banks called in loans, and partners deserted him like rats from a sinking ship, eager to distance themselves from the stench of his impending ruin. The very name Sterling and Hayes became synonymous with corporate malfeasance, a byword for greed and corruption. Their gentrification projects, once hailed as visionary, were now scrutinized, revealing shoddy construction, inflated prices, and countless stories of displaced communities, their human cost laid bare for all to see. Public outrage mounted, fueled by Silas Blackwood's carefully managed press releases that painted Reginald and Vivian as the epitome of unchecked greed, stripping them of any remaining public sympathy. Reginald's personal assets were frozen, his lavish lifestyle exposed as built on a house of cards. His sprawling mansion, his luxury cars, his private jet, all became targets of legal action, collateral for the mountain of debt and fines that rapidly accumulated. He faced multiple civil lawsuits from former tenants he had wronged, from disgruntled employees, and from investors who had lost fortunes due to the firm's collapse. The sheer scale of his undoing was breathtaking. From a celebrated developer, he was reduced to a public spectacle of disgrace, facing potential criminal charges and the very real prospect of prison time. He lost everything: his reputation, his wealth, his freedom. The man Silas had once mentored, the man he had nurtured, had proven himself utterly devoid of the very principles Silas valued. The irony was a bitter pill for Reginald to swallow, realizing too late that the hand that fed him was also the hand that crushed him, utterly and irrevocably. Vivian Hayes, equally implicated, found her career in ruins. Blacklisted from every reputable firm, facing disbarment proceedings for her involvement in the fraudulent legal tactics, she was left with nothing but her ambition and no avenue to pursue it. Her meticulously crafted professional image shattered, she found herself unemployable, her name forever tainted by her association with the scandal. The ruthless drive that had propelled her upward now had nowhere to go but inward, consuming her with bitterness and regret, a self-inflicted prison of her own making. Meanwhile, for Elena Rodriguez, the world had been turned upside down, but in the most astonishingly positive way imaginable. She had initially been speechless, then overwhelmed, then utterly humbled by the revelation. Silas Blackwood, the formidable figure she now knew him to be, summoned her to his private office a week after the hearing. The office was not a sterile, modern space, but a library-like sanctuary filled with old books, leather-bound tomes, and antique maps, exuding an aura of timeless wisdom and quiet power. "Elena," Silas began, his voice warm and genuine, devoid of any pretense, "you fought for me when I was just an old man with nothing. You showed compassion, integrity, and a fierce commitment to justice. These are rare qualities in our profession today, and even rarer in the world at large, qualities that cannot be bought or taught." Elena, still slightly dazed by the whirlwind of events, could only nod, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and disbelief. I just did what I believed was right, Mr. Blackwood. It's what I always try to do." Silas smiled, a true, warm smile that reached his eyes. "And that, Elena, is precisely why you deserve this." He pushed a folder across the polished mahogany desk. Inside were documents outlining an extraordinary proposition. He was not only providing a substantial, anonymous endowment to her legal aid clinic, ensuring its financial stability for decades to come, allowing it to expand its reach and help countless more individuals, but he was also offering her a senior partnership at Blackwood and Associates, with an unheard-of compensation package, and the autonomy to establish and lead a new pro bono division dedicated to tenant rights and elder abuse, a division that would operate with unlimited resources and absolute freedom. Elena stared at the offer, tears welling in her eyes, blurring the elegant script on the page. It was more than she could ever have dreamed of, the ability to truly make a difference, to fight for the vulnerable with unlimited resources, to finally alleviate the crushing financial burden that had plagued her small clinic. She was a young lawyer, struggling to pay off student loans, living paycheck to paycheck, and now she was being offered a position that would allow her to reshape the landscape of legal aid, to be a true force for good. It was a recognition not of her power or wealth, but of her pure, unwavering character. The shock was profound, the gratitude overwhelming. She had acted out of pure kindness, with no expectation of reward, and the universe, in the guise of Silas Blackwood, had repaid her 1,000-fold, proving that integrity truly has its own profound currency. Months later, the dust had settled. The apartment building, now officially under the direct, benevolent ownership of the Silas Blackwood Foundation, underwent extensive, genuine renovations. The heating and plumbing were fully restored, the elevator replaced with a modern, reliable one, and communal spaces were created for the residents, including a small library and a community garden. Rents remained strictly controlled, and the tenants, now secure in their homes, lived without the fear of eviction, their futures protected, their community thriving. Silas occasionally visited, not as the frail Mr. Blackwood, but as the quiet, watchful benefactor, enjoying the genuine camaraderie among the residents, the laughter, the shared meals. He found a quiet satisfaction in seeing the community thrive, a stark contrast to the sterile, profit-driven developments he had once railed against, a testament to what could be achieved with compassion. Silas Blackwood, no longer reclusive, found a renewed sense of purpose. He returned to the public eye, not as the cutthroat corporate shark, but as a vocal advocate for ethical business practices and social responsibility. He used his immense influence to push for stronger tenant protections, to expose corporate malfeasance, and to champion causes that genuinely benefited society, dedicating his twilight years to righting the wrongs he had once only observed. The disillusionment that had once consumed him had been replaced by a quiet contentment, born of witnessing true kindness and wielding his power for righteous ends, finding peace in the pursuit of justice. Elena Rodriguez, now a formidable force within Blackwood and Associates, thrived in her new role. Her pro bono division became a beacon of hope for countless vulnerable individuals, winning landmark cases against exploitative landlords and corporations, establishing new legal precedents that protected the powerless. She maintained her humility and her unwavering dedication to justice, never forgetting the struggling old man who had unknowingly changed her life. She often reflected on the sheer cosmic irony of her situation, a testament to the unexpected ways in which good deeds can be repaid, and how a single act of kindness can ripple outwards, transforming lives in ways unimaginable. The story of Silas Blackwood, the billionaire who became a pauper to expose corporate greed, became a modern-day fable. It was a powerful, enduring reminder that character is often best revealed not in the harsh glare of success, but in the quiet shadows of adversity. It underscored the profound truth that true wealth lies not in the accumulation of material possessions, but in the integrity of one's actions and the depth of one's compassion. And ultimately, it taught that while the world may often seem cold and transactional, genuine kindness, offered without expectation of reward, possesses an inherent power to transform lives, proving that even in the darkest of times, light can be found, and goodness, ultimately, always finds its way back to those who deserve it most. If you were captivated by Silas Blackwood's incredible story of justice and poetic revenge, then you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you more thrilling tales of unexpected twists, dramatic reveals, and satisfying comeuppance against those who underestimate the power of integrity. Don't miss out on our next deep dive into the hidden layers of human nature and the surprising ways fate intervenes. Make sure to subscribe to our channel right now and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when a new story drops. And we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Silas's reveal for you? Do you think Reginald and Vivian got what they truly deserved? And if you were in Elena's shoes, how would you have reacted to such an incredible offer? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We love reading your insights.